Let the battles begin! We're beginning the Memory Box Tournament of Champions here on Have You Played? Andrei!
Hello.
Hey, welcome to this special episode of Have You Played? What are we doing here? Well, we're going to do a little tournament with all the games that we talk about on Have You Played. But it's not going to be a tournament about what game is the best, it's got the best graphics, the best gameplay. No. This is our very personal tournament of the games that we love the most, that we have dragged behind us through our lives, kicking and screaming, as these like foundational games to who we are and the things that we like. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start a little tournament. And today we're going to find, out of the first 8 games that we've covered on the series, we're going to find 2 to enter into the tournament that we will do in another 8, 16, 24 more episodes of this show. At the end of that, we will do an actual full-on battle between all our top games. So how are we conducting this battle, Andrei?
So we went through a couple of iterations before we settled on this. So it was either going to be like a Swiss tournament, which is knockout. I mean, we can't run like a double elimination tournament or whatever. And certain bracket systems work somewhat or not for us. So we have kind of a custom system with a linear point scale. So the way that this works is Mark and I are going to be talking about our picks from the past 8 weeks of games from numbers 8 to 1. And those games will be getting progressively more and more points. So the game that is in 8th rank will only be getting 1 point from each of us. And the game that is in 1st rank from each of us will be getting 8 points. And so at the end of the episode, we're going to have a composite list, which I will be tinkering away with as we record. And that will have a sort of compound value between the both of us. And we have not discussed any of these beforehand, of course. So we might end up with some interesting situations where, I don't know, we so strongly disagree on our number 1 and number 8 that they're polarizing, and like our number 3 ends up taking the lead a bit more in points. It'll be interesting to see how things shake out. That's generally how it goes.
This is what happens when you put the collective emotional mind of 2 people together, is a result that no one is happy with.
Exactly.
Possibly. Now, I will say, though, I did come to this with a tentative list of what I think these are. I am open to being convinced. And also, I think within our linear scale, once we've reached the end, there is some room for negotiation.
It's true.
For what those top 2 games are. Remember, it's going to be those top 2 games collectively that progress forward into the actual tournament itself that will take place sometime within this year.
Exact.
Yeah.
So I might ask you for trades or negotiate you up or down depending on games, and I accept the same thing. I imagine which game will be the subject of your negotiation strategy in these 8 games that we have here in front of us.
Yeah, the thing is I think the game that you probably love the most, I don't hate as much as you hate the game that I love the most. Well, not hate. Hate's a strong word. I might be surprised.
So what are we scoring for? This is an interesting thing because list making and sort of voting processes have been up in the air this last 2 weeks, especially with the BFI Sight and Sound list, and that list apparently just asks people to vote for a top 10, but there's no criteria. So what are our criteria for this?
Well, I mean, I think we have to remember what the show is about, and if you've been listening for a while, you can probably figure out that like the point of this is not to talk about, whether a game is good or bad, what the merits of a particular game might be, but it's like we love all the games we're talking about on this podcast in spite of what their flaws might be, and it's just like trying to get to what these games mean for us, right? And so I think this criteria is really really highly subjective, as it always is, but we're just being fully honest about that subjectivity, right? Like there is such thing as a good and a bad game, but that's not what we're talking about here today. It's really like, for me, the criteria is this: how much have I been thinking about this game? How often do I come back to a part of this game, whatever sequence that is? How does that stand up to the rest of the games on this list? And what do I suspect I will continue to think about going forward that, maybe in talking this out with you through these past 8 episodes, I maybe know a little bit more about why I like certain things in these games, and maybe there are some surprises for me as well, where like, maybe I didn't appreciate this enough.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's a fair shout.
Yeah. What do you think in terms of your criteria?
So I think my criteria is not that dissimilar from yours. I think games that I think about is a good starting point. Like, do I come back to them? Do I watch videos about them? Do they occupy any amount of mental real estate? It's a very good starting point. And they're also games that I think, if I picked it up today, would I enjoy my experience with them? Like, I don't need them to hold up to 2022 games, but like, is it a game that I would want to revisit, or am I shelving it in the past as something that maybe was good then, but I don't need to recheck now,
Yeah.
Which I think is helped by the segments that we do sometimes, like things, do we want different studios to take a stab at this? Like, am I still excited for the IP or the mechanics of the game? And what do I think about them? I'm much less thinking, despite the fact that, our friend Michael Iantorno has told me that I am sort of the math brain sometimes, where I look at sales figures and stuff. I'm really not thinking about commercial success.
Yeah.
Or impact on franchise development necessarily, although I am considering genre development, right? If a game is important to the development of an entire subgenre of game, that does factor somewhat in my ranking.
Yeah.
And I tend to think about the games one relative to the next, right? So like, I'm much more thinking about like, okay, my rank 8 is loosely this game, and my rank 7 is this other game. Am I comfortable with that placement between the two, or do I think that they should be in a different order? And obviously, this is all up for negotiation because I forget things, you forget things. You might tell me like that's a completely unhinged order. Mm-hmm. Why is this here? So yeah, that's generally how I'm coming at this process for now.
Yeah.
And fully expecting to get roasted by people that we know.
Oh, for sure.
Once this goes up.
Yeah, I want to build on that too for a sec, because I'm not necessarily thinking about like the genre impact it had, although maybe I am, but I am thinking about like, did this game change what I look for in a game, in a story more generally, in the form of something, in the aesthetic of something? Because that's a really personal thing that it does to you. It's not necessarily having an impact on the legacy of the media form, but has it influenced what I really would like to see out of something, like that's also something that is factoring in here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think we should probably get into it, huh? Given how long we can talk about board games.
And we can close out the year in style.
Yes, that's right. This is our last one of the year, and let's get into it. So we're gonna go in reverse numerical order. We're gonna start at 8, and we're gonna work our way down. Would you like to begin?
I would. I'm down to start.
Yeah.
So, remembering that this is not a marker of I think these games are better or worse. Number 8 for me is Tomb Raider.
Yeah, this is. Let's just spoil that. Yeah, it's my number 8 as well.
Yeah. So my reasoning is this: Tomb Raider has an extremely long legacy, and it has indeed spawned an entire, treasure hunter subgenre of games, and it's touched a number of, I think, puzzle making mechanics in games like Uncharted, and even things like God of War, or other Naughty Dog or Guerrilla games, for example. But it's not a game that I think about. It occupies like no mental real estate for me. And I can pick it up and I can play it, but I'm not actively, awaiting the next installment so much. And that's never really been the case. Like, there's never been a point in my life where I thought, I can't wait for the next Tomb Raider. This is the most important game on my roster at any given season or year.
Yeah.
And then there's the, stuff that's aged more or less well with the franchise that does somewhat color my thoughts about it now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would agree.
That's where I'm at.
It really doesn't stick with me. The more recent Tomb Raiders as well, I have to be honest. I have an issue with the way the camera moves in those games, so I could never really give them their due because I can't actually play through them comfortably. Like the motion in that the reworked series doesn't work. And then the classic ones, again, like I talked about in the episode, the main thing that I loved about that game was running around the manor, right? Like, which I don't think is, compared to anything else on this list, enough to warrant me putting this ahead of anything else, because I didn't actually really love the core gameplay of the original Tomb Raider games. So I do want to say though that like this thing's placement is partly a result of us trying to invite friends and colleagues of the podcast on and to highlight games that they appreciate that we do not, because they are still valuable. It's just when it comes time to do this bracket, they're obviously going to get a bit of short shrift, I guess is a term that would be thrown around for this. And I do want to say this. I am happy to invite Courtney back in defense of Tomb Raider at a later date. Maybe when we do bracket 2, we can absolutely revisit this, because I'm sure Courtney would like to be present for some of the games in bracket 2 anyway, and that would be a hell of a time for her to make a case for if Tomb Raider should be in the top 2 of this.
Maybe we end up with a wild card edition at the end of all of this.
I'm actually curious what Courtney would say if she's happily on vacation, hopefully happily right now, so she couldn't be here for this one, even for a little bit. But I'm not even sure it would make it up that high on her list either. Yeah. But that's for another date. So our number 8, collectively, we can agree, the Raider of the Tombs.
Yeah. And we should be saying, I mean, if people are listening to this episode, I imagine you've been listening to the podcast up to date, because this is sort of a redux episode. But we are covering the games that we've done in the last 8 episodes. And it is a bit unfair, because in certain cases we're doing single installments, and in certain other cases we're doing franchises. And that's just the way it shook out. But it is something you can call us out on if you feel like that's unfair, because we're comparing sometimes 7 or 8 games compared to 1.
It is also a completely subjective list, and we determined that these are in equal competition with each other in their mind based on their single entry or franchise status. So
exactly.
I don't think you could really call us out. I mean, you can do whatever you want. Also, I realized we didn't do this. What are the 8 games that we're comparing? I think we should probably tell everybody.
Okay. So based on the week order that we did these in, we have Destiny 1, your first Pokemon game, or, collectively our first Pokemon game, Diablo 3, Final Fantasy 8, the Smash Brothers franchise, the Ogre Battle duology, I guess, Tomb Raider as a franchise generally, but with a stronger focus on the first in the remake saga, and then The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past.
Oh, you know what? I actually think the Ogre Battle games are now, based on the most recent Star Wars, a dyad.
They're a dyad.
Moving on. Okay, so those are the games. Tomb Raiders are number 8. What's our number 7 here?
Well, you can start this one.
Diablo 3 is my number 7 spot.
All right.
Do you have a different 7?
Make the case. Oh, I do, but I'm going to let you make the case for this one.
Okay. Diablo 3 is a game that recently I have played far more than other games on this list. However, I think while I had a great time playing it, I don't take a ton away from it. The main thing Diablo 3 instills in me as a feeling is that I hope 4 is good and I have fun with it. Like, that's really all that Diablo does. And I think I think we brought it in here because it was such an experience with the real money auction house, and I don't know, the legacy of disappointment that it has created, and it's still being a good game in spite of that, right? Like I think Diablo 3 is pretty criminally underserved as just like a, if you've never played it, go buy it and play it through once. Like really, it is fun. It is still good in that way. I just um they want it to be this kind of lifestyle game, I think, with the way they do ladders and seasons and all this, and it just never really lived up to that. And as far as like, what do I take with me from this experience? Almost nothing. Like, it's not like I want to see other
Fair.
games do what Diablo 3 does. In fact, in a lot of cases, it's the
Yeah.
opposite.
You hope for more from the franchise than what you've gotten so far, and
Yeah, I
every
mean,
installment.
I do
There's
like
always
the monk, and I do like the way some of the combat of Diablo 3 has been iterated on in more recent games like Lost Ark, where like the action combat is getting even more actiony. It's more
Yeah.
Blizzardy than Blizzard. But again, it's like I'm still waiting for this type of game to hit all the right notes for me. And so
do,
far none of them have.
do you feel like if it had released only in its Reaper of Souls like formation, like with the DLC fully packaged and no auction house shenanigans, you would have had a different experience
No,
with it?
because I played it through when it came out a bunch. Then when Reaper of Souls came out, or at least when I got to it, I was living in Japan and I started from scratch and I played it through once again, and that's all I got out of it. And I liked it. I enjoyed it, but it was a very like middling. And I loved playing it, but in my like mind, in my heart, I finished and I moved on, and I don't really think about it beyond those terms, right? So for
That's fair.
that, it's sitting in that 7 slot for me.
This is where I lose my
I
any
think
any amount of status
I think what
card.
we should do is, where do you have Diablo 3?
Where do I have it?
Yeah, I think that's what we should do if we
It's not much higher than you. It's my number 6.
okay.
So I can't in good conscience place it above some of the other games that we're talking about here because it is a very imperfect game. But I put hundreds of hours of play into this game and really only got peeled off of playing it more when Path of Exile came out.
Yeah.
I was probably going to stay with it indefinitely as someone who really enjoys having a Diablo style game for years more if I hadn't gotten a good competitor. And that's a testament to how responsive and crisp the action gameplay felt at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like the itemization and the skill management especially took a hit. The narrative for me is it's hit or miss. With Diablo games, I don't expect them to be deep lore pinatas like Elden Ring, or to have like a very strong narrative component. But I did feel like 3 was weaker than 1 and 2, and I am generally happy that we're going back to a more gothic aesthetic with 4. So I'm kind of in a position where it's not at the bottom of the pile for me, but much like you, I constantly found every time I went back to it to play for a new season that what I wanted the game to be wasn't quite how it shook out.
Yeah.
And, I do want to maybe make a small mention that like it is difficult also because once original rollout happened and it became more of a service style game, the production team was cut pretty drastically, where I think for a long time they really only operated with about 3 employees upkeeping the game and doing balancing, which if you're looking for a complete 2022 style service game, it's really difficult to have a team of that size deliver it. So
Absolutely.
it is my number 6.
All right. What's your 7?
So my number 7, and this is where I'm going to have to, watch my back for the next month in town, is Super Smash Bros.
Okay.
I think in general, I'm not as high on fighting games as some other folks are. I do enjoy them, but I enjoy them for limited periods of time, mostly because there's not that much to grind in terms of like story content or builds. A lot of the game comes open to you. And Smash is a game that I enjoy playing with friends, but I don't really enjoy playing by myself. Like, it is not a game that I pick up on my own to play. Even the campaign was something I mostly played when I was hanging out with somebody else and we were kind of like lower on energy. This is for Ultimate, of course. And although I've played all of the installments over the years and it's given rise to a lot of evenings for me, it's not really higher, for example, than Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and 3 or Mortal Kombat games or the Injustice games. Like it kind of sits in a roster of similarly engaging and fun fighting games that nevertheless aren't like, if I'm thinking of a fighting game, it's not at the top. And if I'm thinking of games that I enjoy playing with my friends on, those kinds of evenings, it's not even number one at that. And so if we were doing a fighting game list, I think the placement might be different. But I think this is a taste thing where the kinds of games I like playing that are going to be up on this list are just higher than fighting games would be in general.
Yeah, and I think barring maybe a couple exceptions, most fighting games for both of us would probably be lower than most, although I do have a sweet spot in my heart for one, but that's for a later day. My number 6 is Smash. So we just flipped our Smash and Diablo, made that easy for a lot of the same reasons. Although why is mine slightly higher? I think it's a question of like, while I don't have a ton of Smash experiences, the intensity of those experiences, like getting the gang together every time it has happened in my life, which is almost with every new release, we'll get a night or 2 or 3 and we'll get together and we'll jam out some Smash for a few hours at a time. And, in theory, you do this again and again, and it never pans out that you do it again because no one actually sticks with the game this much. But every time we do that, folks are having a pretty good time. Like in the lab where we worked, we did a Smash party there. It was a blast. Like it keeps happening, and I love all of those days so thoroughly. Right. That I think it just has to be a bit higher for that. Whereas like Diablo never did that for me.
I think it's a question of where we played these games and what the social context was for them. And I think Diablo for me, I had like a very conducive like group of people who wanted to play it a lot. Whereas like I didn't have that much for fighting games. So
you brought celery sticks as a snack. I believe so.
When
we did a Smash tournament in the lab. Yeah.
Those were not celery sticks. Those were green onions.
That's right. They were green onions.
We did green onions with cheese, as is Romanian tradition. That's right. Because when I have Christmas parties, they are indeed Eastern European.
Did someone else bring celery though? I remember there being celery. No, it was just
the green onion, and we started betting with green onion on the outcomes of games. So that was a fantastic evening for me.
It was a fantastic evening. That's what I'm saying.
So I would qualify this, tentatively as like my number is 8 to 6. So 8, 7, 6 tend to be like, if I want to tier these, tier C is kind of the tier of games that I have fun when I'm playing them. And there are games that I've played collectively with other people, but they have a limited runway. Like eventually the reason why I'm playing them or the length of time that I am or the context that I'm playing them in tends to run out. And so I don't seek them outside of that. Where I feel like the games that I'm going to start talking about next, going up on those ranks, are games that occupied time or have like moved me to pursue them or games like them directly. I don't know. Do you
100%
feel like that's
although
that's
I would also include my 5 in a kind of personal C tier, to be honest.
Well, I would do that, but I just don't want to shock people with my number 5. So
I think you're gonna start 5 here.
So my 5 is A Link to the Past.
Bum bum bum.
Yeah. So expected based on the last episode that we did, I think this is fully a function of where I came at it in life. It's really hard to make a dent when you have a large basin of games to compare it to, and you're playing it much later, no matter how good it is, because you're not going to have that experience of constantly thinking about it being like the thing that orients a lot of your core childhood memories, which was the case for you and Mike. Like, this was a game that really, I think, seemed to open up new ideas about what games could be, what they could do. Whereas for me, it was like confirming what I already knew was the DNA of many Zelda games.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And so I had a good time with it, and it made me like pursue more knowledge about randomizers, and it, you know, made me play games like Link Between Worlds and replay Minish Cap. But I think I've played this game twice, and I don't foresee going back to it. And so I think it can't be lower than this, because I don't think it has any of the structural issues that the games lower on our list have.
Oh, definitely not.
But it can't be higher for me simply because it just doesn't occupy the space that a lot of these other games do.
But number 5, though?
I mean, we can negotiate it. But
no, it's all good. I totally get it. My number 5 is not A Link to the Past. My Link to the Past is much higher up. So we'll do that when we get to it, I think.
Sure. What is your number 5?
Yeah, my number 5 is Pokemon.
Ooh.
It is, for me now, it is a C tier franchise at this point. And that, you know, as we were talking, I was actually thinking about why is this so low for me, when, you know, I think I had a lot of really, especially if you go back to that episode, a lot of really formative memories about like play and cooperative play and trading and just sitting around with friends and having a very like passive chill time compared to like Smash, where it is about smash, right? Like Pokemon's very different. It's a kind of this peaceful thing where you're collecting little dudes, and, you know, the horrors of that narrative aside, it produces a very different environment when you're playing with your friends, where you're just trying to help each other, you know, finish their roster and all that. And I think part of what has happened to Pokemon is that the franchise has continued. And I don't think it has continued in a particularly strong way, especially for me. And it feels like they keep doing a little too late, aside from, you know, some entries that have really like revitalized interest in the franchise. I think overall where it has come to is just like this point of saturation and lack of just new, fresh, growing ideas that have not grown with me as a person, that make me look back on this with, I think, more criticism and maybe just even like, nah, this is not for me, than I would want to.
Yeah, I can understand that, and it's a bit higher on my list. I think the reason why is probably because I have some more nostalgia elements to it, but I do take your point that the franchise is shaky at times, and it persists largely because it's so massive, because the Pokemon themselves are wonderful to look at, and they're cute, and there's a lot of collector items and franchising aspects to the game that extends way beyond the handheld. And the handheld itself is still something that activates a lot of imagination. But yeah, individual installments can be rough sometimes, to put it lightly, based on 2022 as a case study in how not to ship a game.
It's just the entire, I don't know, the oeuvre of Pokemon has kind of soured me on that earlier experience. Like it's loomed so large that joyful little kernel that is getting into this thing is completely overshadowed by the behemoth that this has become.
All right.
On to number 4.
Do we want to do number 4?
I think so.
Okay, so I guess I can start.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're going to be happy that it made it this far for me. So my number 4 is Final Fantasy VIII.
Let's go.
And this was originally like hard locked in at number 8 when we started the season.
Of course.
And I knew this was coming, and I was like, I really just don't care. But I do think, on the basis of my tastes in game music and a lot of the aesthetics that I enjoy, and particularly like the way that the summons work in this game has, I think, stuck with me in a way where even if I don't like a lot of the mechanics in the game, it made me hyped up for Final Fantasy installments after. And it's nowhere near the top of my Final Fantasy games, but I played it, I think, at the exact right moment for it to generate interest in a game series, which I think comes because I was slightly too young, by like a year or two, to play Final Fantasy VII. So the way that Final Fantasy VII stays as like a, the genesis of Final Fantasy games for a lot of folks, for me it's 8, even though I prefer other games. But I do appreciate that this game is kind of its own story. You pick it up, you play it, it's done, it's cohesive, and you can like or not like that. But I think it's had a much longer tail for me than I expected.
So what Andrei means to say is that through the sheer power of my rhetorical form, I have bumped this 8 points up on his personal list of great games.
Or 4 points up.
4
I
points.
Guess.
Yes, 4 points. Did
Still.
I say 8 points?
Yeah.
That's Final Fantasy 8.
But that's, solid achievement based on where we started this some 2 months ago.
Yeah.
What is your number 4?
My number 4, in a trade of sorts, is Ogre Battle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although you didn't actually like move this up on mine, this is where it was going to land anyway. Like I appreciate this franchise thoroughly, even though I did not have the same personal investment into it that you did. I think it's important, and I think I wouldn't appreciate the games I do if I didn't play March of the Black Queen when I did. Like,
that's fair.
It's an important game for me, even though I don't think I ever finished it. I still rented it again and again and again and played through like the first 10 missions again and again and again because I liked what it did. And I think my love of something like, I don't know, the XCOM franchise probably has a bit to do with this. But then I also found games like Shining Force, and I like those a bit more.
I'm like on the edge of my seat for how these last 3 ranks are going to turn out.
Yeah, it's going to be intense. So I think we'll just recap our bottom 5 for each of us. Mine is Tomb Raider, Diablo 3, Smash, Pokemon, and Ogre Battle.
Yeah, for me it's Tomb Raider, Smash, Diablo 3, Final Fantasy 8. Oh no, wait. Link to the Past and then Final Fantasy 8.
Yeah.
The point scale in front of me is throwing me off. Yeah, there's a lot of numbers in front of me.
Okay.
Single digit numbers.
The number 3. El Numero 3. For me,
Tell me.
me.
Yeah.
It's Destiny.
You start.
Destiny 1 is my number 3.
Okay.
Why is it here?
Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Make
I will.
the case.
I think this is the highest, like, newest game that is on here, right? It's overshadowed, I think, a bit for me by how formative the other 2 games ahead of it are, which we've already talked about a little bit, but we will break into them a bit more in a second about why I value these so highly. And Destiny, for me, I think its main feature was opening up the way for Destiny 2 to exist in some degree, like trying to fully realize the vision that was Destiny 1, and like it's still going. And while I love the game, and I certainly like it more than the other games on this list, it just has like a bit of a ceiling on it. And it's kind of an implaceable why. I just, maybe it's because the game is still going in this new form, and the new form I think has, if not effectively surpassed, like I'm not sure if I feel more strongly about Destiny 2 than Destiny 1 in the moment, but like I can still go play it, and I feel like this is still leaving its impression on me. Whereas the two games above it, like I know how I feel about these, and I don't think it's going to change.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of it.
Yeah.
My number 3.
Do it.
It's Pokemon. I think I share a lot of your criticisms of the franchise, but the main thing that might be different for me is Pokemon extended into my non-video game life, into the Pokemon TCG, to an extent that I play Magic and other card games now because I played Pokemon.
Because of Pokemon. Yeah, that would completely change it.
And I think it's really difficult to measure how big the impact is. And there are some, family stories I've told you about, like, the difficulties my parents went through to get card packs for this when we were down and out, that really make the franchise feel special to me. And the franchise of Pokemon for me is really kind of this tripartite. Like, it's the video games, it's the cartoon, and it's the TCG. And all of them work well, to the extent that, like, when I visited Japan in 2019, I ended up hitting up both Pokemon centers, and like it was kind of a magical experience, and it reminded me how core this is and how much I can still talk about specific Pokemon, and I remember their numbering and their typing, and like they are important to me, even when the individual games themselves fade into the background, right? For me, it really is kind of like memorizing a D&D bestiary and just kind of knowing everything there is to know about the first few generations, at least. I certainly don't hold a candle to Scott in terms of Pokemon fandom, because I think he's much more in that than I am. But every game that comes out, even though like a lot of these last games have disappointed me, I'm like, maybe this one won't. Maybe this is the one that gets me back, and I want to play more. And even when the games aren't games that I'm picking up, I'm like, I really want to see the full list. I want to know all the rosters, all the evolutions, all the gym leaders. Like, I want to get a sense of this.
Yeah.
I think it has to stay here. This is where it's at for me.
I get it. I do want to say too, like, that hope still exists for me, even though this is lower on the list. Like, when a new Pokemon announcement comes out, I'm always like, oh, I hope I'm really into this, and then never am. Which is it's something to be said for that, of like, maybe you need to tweak it just a little bit to, I don't know, but again, maybe not. They're making money hand over fist, right? So I mean, they don't need an old dude like me to be into it. I just kind of wish, like, I don't need gritty Pokemon. That's not what I'm going after here. I'm not at all that kind of player. Aesthetically, you can stay the same, but just like the gameplay improvements they have made just aren't quite enough for me.
Yeah.
I need something a bit more, something spicier. Give me the spice.
I can agree with that. So, it's number 3, and it ends up with a very respectable score from what I can see. I'm going to reveal that in a couple minutes, which I think is a testament to its staying power, even though it's an imperfect franchise. Yeah. And again, like we said at the top of the show, these 8 games that we've chosen are already in a pretty rarefied space based on our consumption of many more games. Like, this isn't all the games we play. This is a series that we've cherry picked that we already kind of like. So it's, it's a choosing among your favorites scenario, rather than like being like, oh, it doesn't make the top cut.
Except for Tomb Raider.
Well, I mean, it is number 8 for a reason. Yeah. Number 2.
Yes. Numero dos. For me, it's A Link to the Past.
Oh, there we go.
I stole yours.
I was going to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what more is there to say for A Link to the Past? It's a foundational game. It holds up. Even if I never touch it again. Changed my life. Changed the way I think about games. It's just great.
Yeah. I mean, there really isn't that much to say when it's your favorite, Yeah. You're like, yes, it's at the top.
Yeah, I always think about when you get out of that first dungeon and you just slide that bookcase, like the bookcase like shuffles to the side and you go on your adventure out of the little church thing. Like I always think about that. It's great. It's it's always going to be there. What a way to open a game. What a that whole opening sequence is awesome. The whole game is awesome.
It is. Are we
It's
Are we
your
ready
number
for my
two.
number two?
Yeah.
It's gonna start to. It's time to close ranks.
It's
My
time to
number
battle.
two is Ogre Battle.
Okay.
So I went, backwards and forwards on my number one and number two, and I think part of why it sits here is I don't think I would play it today if I had the chance. Aside if they did a full remaster. But I played this game for hundreds of hours.
Mhm.
Like, it didn't need any DLC. It didn't need multiplayer. It didn't need anything else than what it was. And that was a ginormous collection of classes. It really got me thinking about tactical RPGs and set me up for RTSs, which I don't play that much, but I think this game has so much DNA that it affects how I think about RPGs. It affects how I think about sim games like Civilization. And I've been looking at newer games like Edge of Darkness to play based on us talking about this game. So it has a really strong presence, but it is not like the game that occupies my thoughts constantly.
Yeah.
It is a game that I think is when you think about something that you played in your childhood that was extremely formative, this game is to me what Link to the Past is for you. Where it's this is the genesis of me loving RPGs as much as I do. And it is also the first solo presentation I ever did in an academic conference.
It is. It was a great presentation. And I was so pleased that I could be there to see it.
So, that's where it stays at my number two. Which brings us to
numero uno.
The number ones. Want me to go? Am I the...
Well, I'll get mine out of the way. Mine's Final Fantasy VIII. I think
the shock of no one.
I think given how hard I went to bat for this thing in our episode about the game, it's pretty obvious that this is going to be my number one out of the games we have done so far. How much further it may continue is to be seen, but I actually think this is closer to how you're describing Ogre Battle for yourself than I would put A Link to the Past there for me. This certainly wasn't how I learned to think about RPGs. Again, if I didn't mention this on the podcast, I learned to read by playing the first Final Fantasy on my mom's lap, right?
Yeah.
I was ground zero for this whole RPG Final Fantasy thing. But this was going into my teenage years Final Fantasy. And I think that's probably just the right time to play a game like this. Of those themes of school days, of rebellion. My God, I just loved what this did. I still think visually it's really impressive, and the music is just out of this world. What if I could make something this good, I would consider my life completely fulfilled. It's so impressive to me. And I think if you want any more reasoning about why I value this game so highly, you can listen to me yell at Andre for an hour and 10 minutes about it.
Respectfully yell.
Yeah, respectfully yell. And I earned those 4 points that I got today. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
So my number one is Destiny 1.
Yeah. A fair place for it, I think.
I felt strange putting it in my number. It's one of those uneasy number ones compared to how I feel about Ogre Battle, which is very uncomplicated.
Yeah.
But I think its impact on the kinds of games that I play, my friendships, people I hang out with, how I organize my time. Destiny 1 kind of took over my life for a couple of years, and Destiny 2 got pretty close also. And it was a point of contact for me and you and some of our colleagues when the initial version of it came out, and then with Courtney when Forsaken came out, and now with Lightfall on the way, potentially in for a third wave of enjoyment. And I find myself constantly thinking about it. There are aspects of it that make you need to pick up the game often to check modifiers and stuff, which I'm not necessarily like the biggest fan of. But I think this game is kind of format-wise the perfect game for how I play games over the last couple of years, where it's like sporadic, intense engagement, and then I take breaks and I come back. And that doesn't mean the game is perfect, because I there are things I wish were different and that they had been different back when it released. And if you want a full breakdown of what this game was originally supposed to be and what it ended up being, you can read Jason Schreier's Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, because there's so much production history on Destiny 1. But I tend to think of Destiny as sort of a unified continuum, where like I when we do the episode for 2, it'll certainly factor in differently as something divorced from Destiny 1. But I remember like every store in my hometown having branded energy drinks for Destiny, and every ad being Destiny, and every person I talked to playing Destiny for like 6 months.
Yeah.
So I think it lives at number 1 for me, despite its flaws. But it, when we get to the champions bracket, it may not make it through to the top rung based on those imperfections.
No, and that's really where this tournament gets interesting, because we have 24 more entries into this thing, and whatever lands in the top 2 today is going to be up against some. I see this list of games in front of me, and I have no idea how any of this is actually going to shake out at the end. And it actually really excites me as a thing that we've decided to do. I think this is really fun.
There's going to be so much to talk about.
What are those top 2 games based on our linear point system here?
Well, I think we should recap our top 8 each, and then I'll tell you what the full list is.
Sounds good.
So for my top 8 in order from 8 to 1, Tomb Raider, Smash as a series, Diablo 3, Link to the Past, Final Fantasy 8, Pokemon, Ogre Battle, and Destiny 1.
Yep, for me it's Tomb Raider, Diablo 3, Smash, Pokemon, Ogre Battle, Destiny 1, The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, and Final Fantasy 8.
So I'm happy to, be transparent with the point count, but I'm not going to bother our listeners unless they want receipts on Twitter or something. The winners of this are in runner-up position Final Fantasy 8.
Okay.
And in number 1, Destiny 1. So those are the 2 games.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah, you got your listen. Top 2 is top 2. It doesn't matter when we get to the 8 bracket,
Yeah.
However that shakes out. There's a big to be fair, there is a big kind of concentration of points where like the difference between spots 1 and 4 is 1 point each. Or 1 and 5. So, Destiny has 14 points, Final Fantasy has 13, Ogre Battle 12, Link to the Past 11, and Pokemon 10. And then it drops off a lot. Yeah. But I think we tend to agree with sort of that top 5 placement broadly as like it being, like a near perfect and a very, very strong collection of games.
Absolutely. I mean, we only picked games that we thought were going to be pretty strong.
I think so.
For the most
and
part.
we tried to pick also with genre distinction so that we would get a better coverage. And obviously, it's really hard to cover every genre of game in 8. So if there are genres of games that the audience is a fan of that haven't appeared yet, you can always tell us. But also, there are some completely different kinds of aesthetics and experiences that we're going to be talking about when we return after the holidays.
Absolutely. Every bracket looks quite a bit different. And before I spoil what we're coming back with, I think we should, tease it. Is there anything else you wanted to say about this bracket as Destiny 1 and Final Fantasy 8 move on?
So I think it's important to remember that like this bracket is the 2 of us and our experiences with these games. And, the contact that we've had over these last 2 months and change, talking about, getting this project going and talking about these games, and also the people who came on to talk about them. So Courtney, Scott, and Michael, influencing our thinking about these games and contextualizing it in different ways. And so, as usual, if people are fans of games and think that they have something to contribute on, the kinds of games that we talk about, I do want to hear from folks in one capacity or another, because it does impact how I think about stuff, as evidenced by Final Fantasy VIII's changing grade, going from really low to, high enough to get it into the top 2.
That's right.
What about you?
You too can be a rhetorical wizard and convince us. And really, the door is open. If you want to come on and talk about stuff, please get in touch with us. Because if you know me, I care way more about what other people think than what I think. I'm much more of a listener, and I do hopefully want to build this space up to be more of a platform for other opinions than my own. But in terms of this first bracket, I love it. I think it's a really cool introductory bracket, and I think things only get weirder as we go out and start mishmashing some way different games together. But next time we're going to come back early January with the newest game that's on our entire list.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
from what I can see, we have no other games from this year currently slated.
And we planned this before it won the big award last week, which is Elden Ring. So actually really excited to talk about how a new game has stuck with us. Effectively brand new, less than a year old when we're going to do this talk. So it's going to be cool to see how does this factor into how we're thinking about games going forward, and what kind of impression did it leave?
I'm really excited. My thinking's changing about it over time, so it'll be interesting to see where I'm at with it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, mine has. It's pretty much the same. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day. And I think, unless there's anything else you wanted to say as we close out the year, anything?
Just happy holidays and happy New Year to everybody listening, and thank you for listening. Thank you for giving us your time.
Yeah,
and guess see you in 2023.
That's right. Oh, 2023. Have a great holiday, and we'll see you next year. Bye-bye.
Bye.